Hey there, this is Annika with Beabo&Honey and welcome to our new cooking channel. I'm so excited to be starting this. So we got a lot of love on our last post on our Instagram page and for this particular recipe that I showed from this past week. So I decided to stay true to my word and show you all how I created this particular recipe. This is going to be our pasta shells with our Cajun white wine sauce with smoked sausage. It's very simple to make, and you'll just be using these few ingredients that I'm showing you right here. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get started here. So right now I have the pan that I'm going to be using, and I've already put the olive oil in here and I'm just letting it heat up a little bit. I used a little bit more than probably you would normally use to get the skillet coated, just because the sausage has a tendency to stick pretty good. So I use just a little bit more than I typically would to coat the bottom of the pan. And the sausage that I use for this particular recipe is this one here. I've already cut the sausage up, but it's the turkey smoked sausage from Hillshire Farm. I think it has a delicious flavor, and I use this a lot in several different recipes that I cook. So you can get this from any grocery store, Kroger, Publix, Walmart. Typically, a majority of these big time grocery stores carry this particular brand, and it's fabulous. I love it. And you can use any sausage that you want, but for this recipe, this is what I use here. So we're gonna get started. So the first thing I do is I go ahead and I start cooking the sausage here. So I've already cut it up. I just cut it into little rounds here, and then we'll just go ahead and put it in the pan here. You kind of want to get it flat as much as you can, just to start off. And you're just going to cook it until it gets brown. Of course, you don't want it to burn or anything like that. So you just want to get nice and brown on both sides. So we'll kind of let this sit here and cook for a minute, just to get it started. And we'll put this to the side here. So let me just show you some of the other ingredients that I use for this recipe. So this is an olive oil that I actually purchased from a local store here in Tennessee, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Is actually where it's located. It's Epicurean Olive Oil Company, and they have different olive oils and balsamic vinegar. So they have an online store, so you can always check them out. I think they deliver. I'm not really sure, but they're amazing. This is the Hoya Blanca. It has a milder taste to it, but they also have different types of olive oils that have a more bold taste depending on the region that the olives were grown in. So it's actually a really cool store, and I visit there often. This is one of my new favorite places to buy olive oils, which you can always use, just your simple olive oil that you get at any grocery store that's available. But this is one of my favorite ones here. Okay. Other things that I'm going to be using, I do the pasta shells here for this dish. I use like the medium shells here. Nothing big on that one. Also use a little bit of chicken broth, the Swanson chicken broth. You can use the lower sodium version of it or just the regular version of it. But this is the one I use. So we'll use a little bit of the chicken broth here. Salt. I use this. Only time I use salt in this recipe is just to cook the noodles. So I put a little bit of salt in the water with a little bit of olive oil, and that's all I use the salt for. And then here I have a little bit of white wine. This is a Pinot Grigio. This is just a cheap wine that I got from Kroger, and nothing fancy about it. The first time I made this dish, I actually used a Madeira wine. Madeira is, I guess, it's a sweeter wine. It's a dry wine, and you always want to make sure you use a dry wine. But Madeira wine is actually really good. It's sweet, but not too sweet. It kind of has a nice medium taste to it, in my opinion. I'm not a big wine connoisseur at all, but That's another option if you're big into wines and cooking with different wines. But I'm just going to use a nice Pinot for this particular recipe. And it's also going to call for a little whipping cream here, a little heavy cream. And we're going to use a little Cajun seasoning. Another Cajun seasoning that I actually like is the Zatarain's. Zatarain's has a delicious one that I've used on several different occasions. But I picked this up. This isn't really expensive at all, but it's actually really, really good. I got this at Kroger. So smidge and spoon, I like it. It's really good. So this is what I'm going to be using for this recipe here. Okay. Some black pepper. Rotel tomatoes, green onion, and white onion. Okay, so that's all we're going to be using for this recipe. All right, so we've let this cook for a little bit, so we're going to start to kind of turn them around. And I don't get really, fancy with, making sure they all flip on each side and everything. Really, I just kind of let them cook through and try to let them brown as much as possible. And I just kind of stir at this point once I get them started. So there's no need to really try to get too technical with this particular recipe. When I first made this, it was one of those things where I came in, I really didn't know what I wanted. I really wanted to make something quick, so I just started pulling stuff out of the pantry that I had, and boom, here we are. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy, okay? It'll come out great just the same. All right. And you still, like I said, want to have the heat. You don't want to have the heat up too high. Of course, you don't want to cook it too fast and burn anything. And so, just kind of be careful and watch the heat as you're cooking, okay? All right. About done with this piece of it here. Kind of flip some of them over here, I guess. You see how it becomes nice and brown on one side? This is what you want. Okay. All right. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to add the whipping cream. And with the whipping cream, I'm only going to do a cup and a half. And you can kind of judge based on how big your family is, the right amount to use. You can always add more cream to this recipe as you go. If you like to have a little bit more sauce, you can do that. Or if you're cooking, like I said, for a larger amount of people, you may want to use more. But for purposes of cooking for 1 to 2 people, about a cup and a half is a good starting point. So we'll just add the cream to it. So this is the cup right here. And you're just going to put it in like so. Okay. And then we're going to just use another half cup. Yes, that's more, dishes to clean, but it works. It gets the job done if you're really big into measurements here. Alrighty. And so we are now done with the cream. Like I said, if you need to add more cream later on to this, because you find that it's not enough sauce or you need to have a little bit more, like I said, you can always add more to the recipe, okay? It will not ruin anything. And then we're just going to kind of give it a stir here. And by this point, I start to turn the heat up just a little bit, not much. You don't want to go super high with the heat, okay? And then I'm going to add 1/4 cup of the chicken broth. Okay, that's really all you need here. I'll add 1/4 cup of that to it. Then we're gonna add 1/4 of a cup of our wine to the recipe. Just 1/4 of a cup. And then you're just gonna kind of stir here. Turn my heat up just a little bit more. And just kind of stir it around for a minute. And it'll eventually start to boil some. All right. So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add, I'll go ahead and add a little bit of pepper. Now, what you'll learn about me with these particular recipes and with any videos that I record from here on out, I will not tell you to how much of a seasoning to use. Everyone likes their food seasoned differently, so you know, I'm personally am more of a heavy seasoning type of person. I like a lot of flavor to my food, and then there's some people who don't like a lot of seasoning. So I'm going to tell you to season to taste. For me, like I said, I like a lot of seasoning, but we're just going to sprinkle some of the pepper in here now, okay, to get it started. And with the Cajun seasoning, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle that in. And as I said, you're going to season to taste on this. I'm not going to tell you. There probably will be very few recipes where I'll tell you exactly how much of a seasoning to use for your dish. It's going to be based on your palate, okay? Me personally, I like a lot. All right? And I particularly like this particular Cajun seasoning because it gives a nice little kick to it. It's not overly spicy, but you can definitely tell there's a spice to it. All right, and then you're just gonna stir up right here. And don't be afraid to taste your foods during, you know, the cooking process. I know at some point in my life when I was first starting to cook, I always had a thing about tasting my food beforehand. I know it probably sounds weird, but I had a thing about tasting the food and it wasn't ready. To me, it was just raw. It was kind of, I know it probably sounds weird, but that was one of my things. But don't be afraid to taste your food, okay? It's your food, all right? It's your playground. The kitchen is your playground. And right now, this is your canvas, and you're going to make it pretty and be as creative as you want to be, okay? Always remember that. All right. So now we got it boiling here, and as you can see, it's not, you know, a huge rolling boil. You don't want that because that means the heat is too high. Right here, where it starts to kind of bubble, have a nice little, you know, it's rolling, but it's not ridiculous or anything jumping out of the pan. This is about where you want it, okay, at this point. Now, we're going to go ahead and add the rotel tomatoes. With the rotel, I drain off the tomatoes, okay, and I want as little bit of liquid in there as possible. And I only add about 1/2 can of the tomatoes to this. So we're going to drain this really quickly, and then we're only going to do about 1/2 can of the tomatoes. We don't want to add too many. Now, if you want to add the whole can, as I said before, you make this recipe your own, and you can add as much as you want. Me personally, I'm not a huge tomato fan, so I like it to have a nice little kick to it. I think it gives a nice little flavor to it, but I don't like too many tomatoes in my dishes personally. But you please your own palate, all right? Alright, so we got these drained off, and I didn't measure these out, you know, gonna be super fancy with this. And so we're gonna kind of measure out about a half a can of this. And as I said, I don't like too many tomatoes here. See, for me, this is plenty for me. But you can add the whole can. It's fine. Just make sure that you drain the tomatoes off really, really good, because you don't want to add too much juice to it. Okay. And I think the rotel with the green chilies that are added to it, I just think it gives this particular dish a really, really, really good flavor. I think it actually brought the dish together personally when I first made this. All right. So now that the tomatoes are added, we're gonna go ahead now and we're gonna add our onion. I love onion, so I like to have a lot of it. And there's no particular way that you need to cut the onion up. I personally kind of did more of a half moon shape with mine, but you don't necessarily have to do it that way. You can chop it or mince it or whatever you want to do to it. Okay, so we're just gonna add the onion here now, and we're gonna start letting that cook. And I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more pepper here at this point. I'm gonna add just a little bit more of the Cajun seasoning here as well, because as I said before, I like my stuff nice and flavorful. The last thing you're going to add to this recipe are the green onions. Green onions have a tendency to cook really fast and can actually burn and ruin fairly quickly if you're not careful. They're very fragile little things, but they're very, very delicious. So that's going to be the last thing that we add to this particular dish. And one thing I did forget to show y'all is that we do add a little bit of cream cheese to this dish just to kind of make it a little creamy. So we're going to add just about a tablespoon of cream cheese at this point. So after the onions, you're going to add a little bit of the cream cheese. So we're just going to add a little bit of the cream cheese here. It's about a tablespoon. You don't need a lot. Now, if you do decide to double this recipe or whatever, if you're making more, then of course you're going to want to add more. But I found that about a tablespoon is sufficient for this particular dish and for the amount that I'm making with this dish. And you're just going to let it cook at this point. You kind of want to make sure you get in here and make sure it all cooks down pretty good. And this is not going to be a thick sauce, okay? It's going to be a thinner sauce, okay? So, you know, if you're expecting something creamy that's not, you know, really, really creamy or thick and creamy, that's not going to be the consistency of this sauce. It's going to be thinner. Well, actually, I think I'm going to add just a little bit more cream cheese to it. It's not going to be much, just a little bit more. All right. So at this point, we still have a nice good boil going. You know, everything is looking lovely. Everything is cooking down beautifully. It's what we want. You're just going to kind of keep stirring and get everything nice and incorporated. The onions are cooking down now, so they're not going to be too crunchy. This is exactly how we want it here. This is great. Alright, so we are still cooking here. And this is a quick meal. This is one of the things that I was really hoping for when I first got in. I was starving when I first got in, when I first made this, and I was like, God, I need something really quick. So this is a quick meal. If it's something that you just don't know what to prepare, this is a perfect meal. It didn't take me long at all to make. And just to kind of show you as well, we talked about the Cajun seasoning. So just to show you, this is the Zatarain's Creole seasoning that I've used before. This is another option for you. There are different types of seasonings out there, so you just pick and choose whatever your favorite one is, okay? But this is just another option of one that I particularly enjoy. I'm gonna turn the heat down just a little bit here. Alright, so the sauce is thickened up just a little bit, but as I said, it's not gonna be extremely, you know, thick and creamy, okay? Alright, so we got that all incorporated, and now we're gonna add our beautiful green onion here. And these things here are pretty much what I keep in my kitchen. I cook a lot, so you know, having green onions, things like that on hand, this is just kind of, this is my thing. So it's, you know, but if it's not, you can always, you know, just kind of remember this recipe. And you know, if it's something that you may want to try, you know, next time you go to the store, these are some items that you can pick up, or maybe these are some things that you can, you know, start adding to, you know, your list of things that you pretty much keep around. There's always those main things that I think you should kind of keep in your pantry at all times, just in case something comes up. All right. And so now at this point, we're going to just kind of let everything cook down. Everything is still cooking beautifully. It smells absolutely delicious. All right, so we got the onions cooking here, the green onions cooking down, and you want them to cook down some. And it'll start kind of looking more incorporated into the sauce as they begin to cook down. But as you can see, they cook down fairly quickly here and look more incorporated, in my opinion, into the sauce. Alright, and I'm going to do a quick little taste test here to see if there's anything else I want to add or anything. If you're particularly fond to spicy foods, you can always add a little crushed red pepper to this. That's another option for you. You can just kind of make this, like I said, your own little creation. So we're going to kind of taste this here. That's perfect. Perfect. And there's no need to add any additional salt or anything like that to it. The Cajun seasoning or Creole seasoning that you use is going to have salt. The sausage that you use is pretty salty, so that's why, as you can see, I use more lower sodium options, like the no salt added to the rotel, the lower sodium chicken broth, just because a lot of things that you cook with have salt in it already. So you kind of want to be careful with that, because it'll actually be too salty. You don't want it to be too salty. So that's why you should always make sure you taste the food before. So be careful too with any Cajun seasoning or anything like that, because it can tend to be a little bit more salty, and it may kind of ruin the dish. For me, this is just the right amount of flavor to it for me. Okay, some people are big salt people and some people are not. I'm not a huge salt person, so I try to be very, very careful with the amount of salt that I add to my dishes. So as you can see now, the green onions have started to really cook down into the sauce. The sauce looks a little bit thicker now, but it's still, you know, fairly thin. It's not like a chowder. At least if it starts to look like that, that's not really what we're going for. All right. And then I'm a cheese person, so I actually got this grated Romano Parmesan cheese from Publix the other day when I made this, and I think it kind of added to it as well. So this is an option for you if you want to do that, since this is like a pasta dish. I thought it made it actually taste pretty good, so you can use this if you want. And I went ahead and incorporated it into the sauce. I'm going to start turning this heat down a little bit. And you want to make sure at this point that you really are stirring, because the cheese and everything can actually stick to the pan. So just make sure as soon as you add it that that you really do continue to stir at this point so it doesn't stick. And as you can see, it'll kind of melt too. This is amazing. This smells so good. I can't wait for you all to try this. I hope you all decide to try it, and I hope that you really like it. I really would appreciate some feedback from you all on this, because that tells me then that, you know, we're on the right track. All right, so now our sauce is pretty much done. Everything has cooked and incorporated through. And so at this point, I'm going to add the noodles. The noodles have now, at this point, have cooled down. And so we're just going to now add the noodles to the pan, okay? So I used probably about a half of a box of the shells. Like I said, you can use more or less for this recipe. I found that this about a half of the box or of the shells is sufficient for me. And plus I use this too so I can have something to take for lunch the next day or something like this. So I know the last time I made it, it was good for, I think I got about another 2 days worth of leftovers out of it. So it wasn't too bad. After a couple of days, I'm over it. So, but yeah. So at this point, you're just gonna now mix the noodles in. Kind of incorporate the noodles with the sauce. And this is the point where you'll judge to see, you know, is this enough sauce for me? Is this, you know, do I need to add a little bit? And at this point, you can add a little bit more cream to it. You don't have to season it or anything like that. You'll just add the cream to it and just incorporate it in. The seasonings will go through it just fine. Just make sure you add a little bit at a time so that it doesn't get too soupy or anything like that. So I would maybe do probably about a quarter of a cup at a time, just to make sure you want to make sure it incorporates well and doesn't get soupy. So now we got all the noodles incorporated in here. The sauce is all incorporated into here. And at this point, this is when you will plate and you will enjoy at this point. And I'm just going to give it a little taste here to see how everything turned out. At this point, you can turn your heat off. And yes, I'm using a spoon, not the best mechanism, but really, really good. Really good. All right. So this is this dish. I hope you enjoy it. As I said, please give feedback. You can also follow us on Instagram at Beabo&Honey. We have many pictures, as well as we are a desserts catering service. So we actually do all kind of things. One of the things we're most known for are our pecan pralines. So if you're in the Tennessee area, especially in the Nashville area, we do various pop-up events. So please, when we post, come on out and come get a treat from us. We would love to see you. We love meeting new people. And from now on, we're going to actually start doing this channel a little bit more and giving you all some different recipe ideas. And, you know, we hope you enjoy. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.